From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Ecuador must now pay possibly billions in compensation to oil giant Chevron Texaco. The International Court of Arbitration ruled in favor of the company. It found Ecuador guilty of violating a bilateral agreement and withholding justice from Chevron. That treaty required state oil company Petroecuador to assume responsibility for damages by allowing indigenous communities to sue Chevron.
The ICJ's verdict did not establish an amount that the Ecuadorian state must pay to Chevron. The appraisal stage for damages that must be paid to the company will start in 90 days and could last for months. Within those same 90 days, both the state of Ecuador and Chevron must present official letters outlining their claims in regards to the monetary sum. Today's verdict concludes that the Ecuadorian state is responsible for having violated Article 2 of the bilateral agreement for investment protection between Ecuador and the United States.
The court ruled that Ecuador will have to pay economic compensation to their corporation. Denise Herrera with the details.
In 2003, a group of indigenous people from the Ecuadorian Amazon started a series of legal actions against Chevron for its harmful behavior, including spilling 60 billion liters of toxic water into the Amazon. Chevron not only violated the rights of the communities, but also was accused of being responsible for causing the deaths of several indigenous people.
The three women from three different families that lived near the pool died of cancer.
Despite the damage generated by Chevron, the Court of the Hague has ruled in favor of the oil company and declared Ecuador responsible for violating a bilateral investment treaty signed with the United States in 1997. The amount Ecuador will need to pay Chevron will be settled within the next 90 days.
According to the tribunal, Ecuador didn't comply with its obligation of not suing the companies Texaco and Chevron for environmental damage.
The government of Ecuador, in response to this ruling, said that it will find the perpetrators of this situation and blame former President Rafael Correa for spending public funds on a campaign to aid the indigenous people and their trial. In light of these events, the defense team of the indigenous people affected by Chevron have rejected this decision.
The agreements are below the frameworks of rights, and they cannot, under this legal norm, prevent people from having rights and access to justice. We will continue fighting in the international courts, looking for our sentence to be executed internationally.
The Dirty Hand of Chevron campaign condemned the behavior of U.S. multinational oil company Chevron in the Amazon. Ecuador's Constitutional Court has rejected Chevron's request to revise a national court ruling that sentenced it to pay $9.5 billion in environmental and social reparations to the communities affected during its operation in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
And Telesur English recently published a documentary short featuring those affected by the oil spill. You can watch the entire documentary on our website at telesurtv.net/English. It's Independence Day in Brazil, and just a month away from the most uncertain elections the country has seen since a return to democracy. Marginalized communities are coming together in cities all across the country under the motto, "Inequality causes violence." People are mobilizing against growing inequality and violence, including Thursday's attack on a presidential candidate and for Lula da Silva's right to be free. Let's hear more from our correspondent Ignacio Lemos in Sao Paulo and Andre Vieira in Rio.
I'm standing in Paulista Avenue, where a protest named The Cry of the Forgotten has started. This protest is held by historically marginalised communities who have long denounced that the country's independence did not take into account their people. Part of this event is also a demonstration asking for the release of Lula da Silva, despite the fact that it was just yesterday when the Supreme Court quashed any hopes of Lula's defence team and of his followers by deciding that the former president could not run for office. Demonstrations like this are taking place all over Brazil, asking for democracy and non-violent solutions to the ongoing crisis. In particular, talking about the stance of far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro, who was recently stabbed during a rally. They say that while unfortunate, the candidate has frequently advocated for violent solutions to the country's issues, and this march stands against violence in all its forms. We continue from the streets, accompanying the excluded peoples of Brazil. On September the 7th, the official independence of Brazil is celebrated, but social movements have been making these demonstrations for 24 years to denounce the fact that Brazil was no longer an independent country, and that since the coup, Brazil's dependence on international interests has intensified. This year they are denouncing that inequality is the cause of growing violence. They also reject the attack against the right-wing presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro on Thursday, and also the effects that the coup has had on the country. They demand the return of democracy in Brazil through clean and honest elections. So the social movements are here in the streets of Rio de Janeiro, standing for the excluded communities of Brazil.
Thank you, Andre, for your report. Sandra Quintela, author from the Institute of Alternative Policies for the South, spoke with our correspondent at the march in Rio.
This movement of the excluded is a way to say that Brazil is not yet an independent country. September 7th is Brazil's Independence Day, but we are still very dependent on big capitals of the international bourgeoisie. So this movement of the excluded is to demand our independence, and now even more because we are in a complex situation in Brazil. Because we still don't know who are responsible for the murder of Marielle Franco, with the imprisonment of Lula da Silva without any evidence, and right now with the attack against a presidential candidate. This may open a wave of violence, and we totally reject what happened yesterday with the candidate Bolsonaro, even though we do not share his extreme right-wing political views, but we reject the violence in any form. We are here to say that Brazil will find a way to solve these issues. Our motto is inequality causes violence, and we believe we should stop the system of privilege. Our motto is so relevant because Brazil is becoming more and more an unequal society ever since the coup in 2016. Poverty has increased in these 2 years.
Supporters of the Brazilian far-right candidate stabbed on Thursday are calling for a federal investigation into the attack. Jair Bolsonaro was stabbed during a campaign event by suspect Adelio Bispo de Oliveira. The demand for a federal inquiry came after the initial police reports said that the attacker suffers from a mental illness and had acted alone. But the supporters say that they are concerned that if the suspect is found to have a mental illness, it could affect police investigations and a possible sentence. The people of Rio de Janeiro have also been coming together to begin the reconstruction of Brazil's National Museum. The museum burned down on Sunday, destroying 200 years of priceless artifacts.
The building that housed Brazil's National Museum survived the fire that destroyed 90% of the artifacts inside. Nearly 20 million pieces spanning millions of years of existence were lost. The academic community has promised to continue reconstruction efforts.
We didn't just lose Brazilian history, we lost artifacts representing millions of years of human history, like fossils, indigenous artifacts, and ancient insects.
One of the biggest losses was the oldest human fossil in the American continent, Egyptian mummies, along with countless archaeological and geological collections that told the history of the continent's original people.
This was an attack on our memory, on our history, on the original languages of Latin America. It's very serious, one of the worst attacks on the history of the indigenous people.
The National Museum is part of the University of Rio de Janeiro, which has faced large budget cuts since 2015. They've only become worse since President Michel Temer came to office. He cut the museum's budget by nearly $20 million.
It's not just the museum. The whole country is being affected by this perverse logic of budget cutbacks. We have started to mobilize, trying to show our reality, to inform people to fight these policies. To destroy Rio's university is to destroy the nation itself. It's destroying our future.
One of Michel Temer's first measures was a constitutional amendment that froze public investments for 20 years, greatly affecting culture and education.
I think there has to be political compromise so we as a nation can revoke these measures, because education, health, culture and even science are being eradicated.
The Brazilian people will not hold anything back in their efforts to see the museum be rebuilt. They also say they will take to the streets to demand that the constitutional amendment that froze public spending for 20 years be repealed.
Desde Rio de Janeiro, André Vieira e Sebastián Soto, Telesur, Brasil.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In Argentina, the streets of Buenos Aires have been turned into classrooms. University teachers and students attended their lectures, blocking dozens of main avenues as part of protests against government austerity measures. The government intends to cut spending on education to offset inflation, while teachers have been asking for an increase in pay. The protesters blame the government for failing on the economy and burdening the country with a $50 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund.
The problem we are having is budget changes in science and technology, the disappearance of faculties together with teachers, and the lack of money for research in the country. Without that research money, then lines of investigations die. As students of the physics faculty, we have the problem that if teachers don't get paid, then we lose days of class and this semester.
Additionally, researchers have the same problem. Young researchers have no way of getting into their scientific field now. What is starting to happen is a brain drain, where the human capital trained for science and university has to leave the country because there is no place for them.
Hundreds of people in Argentina have also protested outside the former labor and agronomy ministries on Friday. The ministries have now been absorbed by other government budgets as part of the country's belt-tightening imposed as part of a pact with the IMF. Argentina is suffering its worst crisis since Mauricio Macri was elected as president, seeing shrinking of the state ministries and increased unemployment.
Neither the IMF's intervention in Argentina nor presidential announcements have calmed down anger on the streets of the country. Economic uncertainty, the increasing devaluation of the national currency, and closed ministries supposed to reduce the fiscal deficit make part of the country's crisis and show the lack of public and social policies.
The results of turning the labor ministry into a secretariat, which depends on the production ministry, is a hard hit for labor rights. Another problem is that they are just considering this as a matter of salaries. seen from the enterprise's point of view.
Problemática como una cuestión estrictamente.
We are not sure about how we will manage the workers, but we have witnessed before how they manage different programs, such as ANSES, where many workers were fired in the name of development.
This way, national ministries were degraded and turned into secretariats, which means that the dismissal will increase and budget will be reduced. Among the main affected are the health, labor, and science and technology fields, all vital for the country's development.
It is clear that this is a decision of great concern. This was seen with dictatorships in the past. It was during Ongangia's government that ministers were turned into secretariats. So this is just an example of what we can achieve with these policies.
Despite these decisions, which affect the country's economic growth, Macri increased the budget to fight Kirchnerismo by 25%. However, the head of Macri's cabinet, Macros Peña, stated that they will keep it and it will be included in the 2019 budget.
Y esta decisión entra dentro del presupuesto que el gobierno presentará para 2019.
I think we must not vote for this budget. We still must see what the Congress members will do later, but I think that we must ignore it because it is part of the cuts. It is IMF's money.
Meanwhile, different analysts say that inflation has reached 33.8% and calculate that the year will be close to 44%. The data shows that unemployment will increase and many small and medium companies will be forced to close down.
A new mass grave has been discovered in the state of Veracruz in Mexico with 166 human skulls. Analysis has indicated that the bodies had probably not been there for more than 2 years. This is the second largest mass grave found so far in the state, where organized crime has been a major security threat. Since 2012, more than 300 mass graves have been found in the state.
I personally supervised the work in the search area. Because of security reasons for those personnel still at the site carrying out work. The location has not been identified. Aside from human remains, we have found more than 200 items of clothing, 140 pieces of identification, such as different accessories and personal items.
And a year after the deadly 8.2 magnitude earthquake struck southern Mexico, many victims are still waiting for governmental aid. Governmental assistance was promised shortly after the massive earthquake devastated the Isthmus of Tehuantepec region a year ago. Yet, many of the victims are still living in makeshift sheds. Local records state that less than half of the 14,000 damaged homes have been rebuilt.
The president, Enrique Peña Nieto, said he was going to help me with material things, get them back for me and give me a grant for my son until he finishes school. But I've gotten nothing so far. Because my son goes to school, I've even been given phone numbers to reach out to, but I call and they don't answer.
Incluso me dejaron números telefónicos para comunicarme.
Mexico's current government may be on its way out, but it continues to come under scrutiny for its exorbitant spending. Leader Enrique Peña Nieto has starred in several TV commercials, and his government has racked up a $2 billion bill for these self-promoting ventures.
En estos siguientes 12 días que tendré la oportunidad de dirigirme a los mexicanos.
The media campaign for the sixth and final report of the Peña Nieto government will be one of the biggest. Over 12 days, radio, television, and social media ads will feature him outlining his administration's accomplishments. In the videos, the outgoing president thanks Mexican citizens for supporting him during his term. He also uses the platform to talk about the White House scandal, the increasing cost of fuel, and the forced disappearance of 43 students in Ayotzinapa. A study conducted by the Center for Analysis and Investigation reveals that his administration doled out $2.5 billion on publicity during its 5-year run. That's twice the generous media budget Mexican lawmakers allotted it for 2016 alone. Yet the president's image barely ever improved.
With these ads, he's trying to gain empathy from the people, but there is none of that to be found. This campaign will have no effects whatsoever in how he is perceived. If anything, it will have adverse effects.
The latest polls show that 78% of Mexicans feel that the country is worse off than when Peña Nieto's term began.
There were many important events during his presidency, but all reforms and every expectation ended in disappointment. Some of his work was even well-intentioned, but the people never saw any significant change. And if anything, things are worse.
Amid these concerns, President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has already announced that the budget for media and advertising will be cut.
The government's publicity budget will be cut by 50%.
It's part of AMLO's proposed austerity measures. He says this will save Mexico over $26 billion per year. That figure represents about 10% of the country's gross domestic product.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
We are African. Culture and tradition is what we are born with.
We might be apart in terms of distance, but we are always together. We need to love ourselves.
Back to Africa.
Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said rebel militias in Idlib, Syria should surrender in the interest of civilians. Speaking at the Syrian summit hosted by Iran on Friday, Putin urged rebels to lay down their weapons. His comments come as Syria prepares for a major offensive in Idlib to oust the al-Nusra Front.
The main task at this stage is to banish militants from the province of Idlib, as their presence there poses a direct threat to the safety of the Syrian citizens and residents of the whole region.
Protesters have attacked and set the Iranian consulate on fire in Basra, Iraq. As the latest episode of the deadly demonstration starting on Monday, protesters forced their way into the building. They condemned the political influence the country has over Iraq. Residents say corruption, the lack of power, and drinking water also triggered the protests. At least 10 protesters have died since the clashes broke out. And Israel is constructing a 30-foot-high wall along the border with Lebanon to prevent its enemies from infiltrating the country. The wall will be equipped with steel mesh and high-tech surveillance systems. So far, around 7 miles have been built, but that will eventually extend to 80. Lebanon has announced the wall as an intrusion of their territory. A Palestinian teenager has been killed and over 200 have been wounded by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip. The 17-year-old Palestinian Belal Mustafa Kafaja has been shot in the chest by an Israeli sniper. According to health officials, at least 167 Palestinians have been killed and 18,000 injured by the Israeli forces since the Great March of Return protests started 5 months ago. And Jamaica proudly celebrates its beloved cultural icon, Louise Bennett Coverley. Miss Lou paved the way for the Jamaican Creole language, which is called Patois, to be known across the world. It's an English-based Creole language with West African influence. Thanks to the lifelong work of this performer, poet, and academic, there have been breakthroughs such as the Jamaican Patois Dictionary and the Creole Bible. In paying tribute, Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holmes tweeted in Patois, "Thank you, Miss Lou. We appreciate all you do for we. And everybody knows, say, Jamaica people large and in charge." And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.